Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Minimalist Educator podcast. We are very excited today because we have a great topic, but we also have some very special friends joining us today. Not only is it me and Tammy, but we also have Krista, Sheila, Naomi, and Nicole, all returning guests. So, welcome, everybody. I hope you're doing well.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so
Excited
much.
to be here.
So excited to have this chat. So, today we are sharing our unpopular opinions about education. Might get a little bit controversial here. Might have to give a few caveats as well, maybe. So, we've each prepared an unpopular opinion to share with you today, and then we're going to have a little bit of a chat about it. So, I'm going to start us off out of the 6 opinions today. So, my unpopular opinion, everybody, is attendance policies inhibit a well-rounded education. So I am currently in a school system where we do have quite strict attendance policy. So it does make me think about it quite a bit. And I think I'm also influenced by my culture as well, my Australian culture. But I really do feel strongly that there's so much experience and learning that happens outside of the school and the school day. And I feel like attendance policies can really make us focus on all of the learning that can happen in a student's life is just going to happen within the walls of the building. And I just really, truly disagree with that idea. And I think it puts a value on not the learning. It puts a value on ideas about compliance and whether you've got the wherewithal in your life to actually show up every single day to the school. So I feel like we should find ways to measure and value the learning that's going on or our attitudes to learning rather than just showing up, And I might bring Krista in on this last point as well. I think we if we want to have social emotional learning, if we want our students as part of their education to develop EQ, we want them to be paying attention to how their body is and how they're feeling. And if you have just got really strict attendance policies about you have to show up, that encourages people to ignore what's going on with themselves, and just keep going and turning up even when maybe they shouldn't be. I don't know if you wanted to weigh in on that, Krista.
Yeah, you were going one direction and then you added on another really fantastic part about if your body's not feeling well, forcing yourself to show up is not the healthiest thing for you. And knowing when it is time to step back and to take a rest, because that is restorative. And your first part was reminding me of a trip that we saved up for and took the boys to Italy. And that was such a great learning experience that they had. And it also had me thinking that, and I wonder what the others think on this, that perhaps there could be a collaborative piece around reflection for the students when they go on different trips or when they're staying home. Like, how are you feeling right now? What was an aha that you had? What would you do differently? And it would allow the school and the home to come together to support the student and broaden the student's learning. So, Sheila, I see you nodding your head. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yes, I was just thinking from my own experience back when I was in the classroom full time, and our policy was if there was a extended absence, whether it was for a vacation or the student was sick, they wanted us to have math and English, all the schoolwork put together and sent home for them to do, whether it was because they were sick, which is crazy. Like, yes, let's do schoolwork while you're sick. Or when you're on vacation, they were expected to do the work that they were missing in class. And I don't think it's probably a surprise to anybody who knows me very well that I didn't always do what I was told to do in the classroom. I did what I felt was best for my students, and what I knew from research and experience as well. And I always would send home a blank little journal and said, if you have the time while you're on vacation and you're looking for some downtime or some reflection time, and that's when I heard you say, Krista, about the reflection time, take the time to do something in the journal, whether it's to draw a picture. I was a first grade teacher. Draw a picture or write a sentence, or what was your big excitement piece from the day, or what are you looking forward to for tomorrow? And whatever you do is wonderful. And if you come back with a blank journal, that's okay too. Because when you come back, that's going to offer our time to have a discussion and talk to the class and share and connect with everyone with your experience. But it wasn't so much about that end result of what is the work or having to show up because it's that specific policy that this is what we do. There needs to be that flexibility and meeting each family where they are. And coming from that social emotional piece, how important it is to have that quality time with your family members or extended friends, whomever it is that you're spending your time with, to build and connect with them and what learning opportunities are in those experiences and not on a piece of paper or on a project or a report, because that is what we said has to be done. So that was where I was nodding and going with all of that. But I'll let someone else chime in.
So I have a lot of thoughts around that, and I've heard lots of different opinions from teachers that I work with. But this part, kind of what you were just talking about, Sheila, kind of lends itself to the unpopular opinion that I was going to bring up. So I won't bring it up though, unless someone else has something to say about this first one.
I was just
But
going to
there,
share because um, as soon as you brought it up, Christine, I was like, yep, like that was me at the beginning of my teaching career. Because, right, like at the very beginning of your teaching career, you're like, you're learning everything and you're like, okay, the school says you can only miss 10%. Like it's a big deal. You have to be here. Like it's important. We're doing important work here. Like, which, yeah, we are. But at the same time, like there's 6, 7, 8. Like there's other things that go on. It's life. Like you don't go to work every day. You get sick sometimes, or you take time off to go on a vacation. Like it's the same thing. And I remember it wasn't until I moved overseas and, I had multiple kids that they would send in a note and the parents are like, oh, the doctor prescribed a week by the seaside or this or that. And I'm like, this is bogus, right? Like, this is insane. And then I'm like, why not? I would love a week by the seaside. Like, that sounds lovely. Like, also, what does it matter? It's not going to like have a huge impact on their educational career as a whole if they're missing a few days here and there, like especially when they're super young because they're like just learning how to be a human still. So, yeah, I after I kind of had that like realization, I'm like, yeah, one as a teacher is way easier for me because that's 1, 2 less kids I have in my class for the day, right? Like okay, great. Have a good day. And then also just thinking about like as a little human, like sometimes you need a day to do whatever it is you need to do. Sometimes your parents are like, we cannot get it together. I just can't even take you to school. Like, okay, like what? That's fine. They can spend the day together. Or like what you were saying, Sheila, like they're having time with family or good friends that they haven't seen in a year maybe, or who knows. And like that's just as important, if not maybe more important. So it's just so funny. I think it's probably partially just like in the beginning of your teaching career, right? And you're just like trying to figure everything out and like what do I have control over versus what do I not have control over and all of those things. But yeah, now I'm like, you want to go for a week? Great. Have a great time. Send me a postcard. Tell me about it when you get back. Like, but yeah, it's definitely an interesting topic for sure. I'm glad you brought that up.
yeah, I was wondering what our differences in opinion might be, just having half of us who have worked internationally and the other half have been more local or like US based, because I too had a similar like when I taught New York, I was like, why aren't they here? Like they should be here every single day. They need to be here. But then, you know, living and working in a place where it's highly transient and people are traveling to their home countries a lot to see their families, like they need the time to travel from like Singapore to, England or whatever. Like that's a long journey with a family. So that extended time is sometimes what they just have to do. Um, so I'll bring up a next opinion and then because it's related. Um, and this opinion is that longer school days mean more learning. Does anyone want to? I mean, I can definitely start on that because um well, okay, my brain is going in different directions. Let's start with high school students, right? We know that teens need more sleep, but yet they start their day at a time when it doesn't developmentally work for them in almost every place. There are definitely districts who've tried the later start and it has benefited their students. Their attendance has increased. But now we're looking at and not just now, but we've been in a time where let's send our 3 and 4 year olds to junior kindergartens at like 7 a.m. Give them a longer day at school. But why? Why are we doing that to little people? So just because they're in a school building early in the day and then they stay for after school and extended care, which isn't always academic, sometimes those are clubs and things which are great, but they're in a school building for a long time. And just because they're there, it doesn't mean that the learning time for them is rich or meaningful. And I get, a lot of it has to do with parent schedules, but is it good for kids to be at schools for that long? I don't know. Anyone
Yeah,
else?
I was ready to like argue, and then you kind of added on like there are a lot of parents that have to work, single parent households and households where both parents have to work, and school serves many purposes in addition to educating kids, right? And I know that we all know that, but it's like it's feeding the kids. It's like giving them a safe place to be. And it's like childcare when parents have to go to work. So I understand why 3 and 4 year olds are in school for long days. I think my own kids, when they were in preschool, I probably dropped off at 7 a.m. because I was a classroom teacher and I had to be at school by 7:30. So my kids were at their daycare by 7 and I didn't pick them up till I think 3:30 or 4 because I wasn't allowed to leave until after 3. And so, yeah, it's a super long day for them. But I think that what you said after is a key piece is that it doesn't all have to be academically structured, that there are other kinds of enrichment activities so we can still have the kids in this safe place, provide the child care, feed the kids, but after a certain time you know, or maybe not even at a certain time, but like sprinkled throughout the day. Maybe a longer school day is a good thing if we have time for breaks in the middle and it's not just pushing kids straight through for 5 hours. And instead, we're going to do like 3 hours on, 1 hour off, and then another 3 hours on. And maybe that changes the way things look. So, I think the context matters a lot, and it's not just like longer school is bad.
I think that's a good point. And this is a little bit of a tangent. That's part of the reason why I've never given homework to kids is because I tell parents, like, your kid is at school all day doing work. Like, they don't need to go home and do more work. They can go home and be with you because they're away from you for so many hours. But I think, like what Naomi you were saying, you made me think about that. I go into classrooms these days and I'm thinking kindergarten in specific, and there's like no play happening. So they are at school for a long period of time and they're just doing academics with like a small morning break and like their lunch and then that's it. Like what you're saying is great. Like yes, come in, have some breakfast, play for a little bit, then we'll do some academics, then we'll have a break and some snack and do some building or do some this or have some play and then like that makes sense if they're there for longer hours because they're not just doing academics like we're saying, like sit down and read and do this or that, they're getting a more well-rounded experience because they're getting all of the things they need, not just sitting and listening to a story or, like whatever we're seeing in a lot of classrooms these days.
And we've all felt that pressure as teachers, right? Like, I have this much stuff to get through in this amount of time. So maybe opening up more time takes some of that pressure off. And even if it's not, I mean, this is an ideal world that I'm talking about with like 3 hours on, 1 hour off. But even just saying there's an extra hour in the school day changes the mindset of the teacher into thinking like, oh, I can do some of these other game-based activities or other things because I have more time to get the same amount of stuff done.
Yeah, and Tammy, you mentioned early on the high school perspective, and so I'd like to share from a secondary perspective that often our schedules for students are driven by, in my experience, two things: sports at the end of the day, and if the olders have siblings that they need to be home for, so that they're home before their younger siblings, so that when they get home, the youngers get home, there's somebody there to take care of them. So we know this research that it is better if our older students go in later, but we're looking at students who have scholarships in sports, and holistically, we don't want to mess. And I say we as a society don't want to mess with that, along with, well, who's going to watch my younger child when we get in? And I think that it brings up another interesting point too, that there are more freedoms as students get older. My middle son, for instance, had study hall at the end of the day, so he was able to leave. He had his credits. There was no sense in keeping him in the school, and so he was able to sign out. And so he would go to an afternoon work job, which was fabulous for him because he got life experience on this job and realized that that particular thing was what he did not want to do. But he would also spend time doing service projects. So he worked in the wood shop with the teacher and would be making plaques for Veterans Day. And so it kind of goes back, you're right, to what Christine was saying, and that not all learning is going to be that academic math, science, social studies, language arts, music, that type of a thing. But are they learning? And again, Naomi and Nicole brought up really good points too on what is the context and what does that quality look like? Because not all learning needs to look the same.
And another argument, no, that's okay. Another argument that I have heard around more school is, we established our year schedule with summers off when, there was a lot of farm work that needed to be done and we needed our kids to come and help us harvest the field over the summer, and we don't have that anymore. So why do we still have these long breaks over the summer? And, I don't know, you guys have all been in a school in May. It doesn't seem very appealing to keep going all through summer at that point of the year. But as Naomi brought up the idea of, the other things that school provides, and maybe if it was, let's do the same amount that we're doing, but actually across the years, so we can actually breathe and do it deeply and really intentionally rather than cram, it might have a different appeal to people than just the thought of doing what we do, but for 12 months a year. So.
Yeah, this is making me think too, because Tammy, I know you have some teachers that schools are going down to 4-day work weeks. And so the days are a little bit longer, but they only go to school 4 days. So then thinking about like there's no room for flexibility. So that's also tricky.
Yeah, I was just talking to one of those teachers yesterday, and she loves having the Friday as a day, they get the 3-day weekend all the time. But she does feel like it does feel like she's pressed during the week because she teaches all the kids art, right? So it's just a different kind of schedule too. But yeah, I mean, it's an option too, and it's something that school districts have had to do when budgets are also tight. So, that's another probably popular opinion if we talk about budgeting. But anyway, we'll move on. Krista, do you want, or Sheila, you were going to say something, or do you want to share your unpopular?
When you first shared your unpopular opinion, I thought originally you were going in one direction with when you had said the longer school days means more learning, meaning like, oh, if we extend the day, the kids can learn even more stuff and we can cram in more. And right away, I went to the thought of Parkinson's law, where you'll get done no matter how much time you have, you'll stretch it out to fit that period of time. And then as the conversation was going on more and more, and then you kind of end it with the going to a 4-day instead of a 5-day and it feeling crammed. Then I was thinking more of like the minimalist educator aspect of like being very intentional. Like if you have a limited amount of time, you really have to be more focused and intentional. What is the most important, and not stretching it out, on the flip side of the conversation here of, instead of stretching it out and really going like way more into what you need to, using up because you have 5 days, then, well, I'll just touch on it today and touch on it again tomorrow because I have more days to get it done, versus really thinking, well, what is it that's necessary and not extra stuff that I'm just throwing in because I have all this time to fill. And so that's kind of I just kind of felt that connection of being a little bit more intentional on what exactly is important and necessary versus just filling in the time because the time is there, which I know time is a big issue in education in general. It never seems like we have enough regardless, but I think that's why the minimalist educator is such a benefit to know what exactly is important and prioritizing that. And when we get to my opinion, it kind of ties into a lot of what has already been said, but I'll continue to go on a tangent. So I'm going to stop there.
No, don't stop there. Share your unpopular opinion.
Wait, can we
yeah.
like pause for 1 second, please? Like, I don't
Yeah.
want to just like shut off my camera in the middle of the recording, but like my house alarm is going off.
Oh.
Just like give me 1 second, please.
Yes, absolutely.
Hopefully
dear.
it's nothing that's an actual issue either. This is fun to talk about this stuff.
I was going to say at the very end of this, it's going to be interesting to see, because I feel like there's a lot of commonality despite it being these different opinions, how there is a common theme running through. So it'd be interesting to see at the end the big ahas that come out regardless of what the opinion is.
Yeah.
How's everything, Naomi?
All good?
I'm sorry. It's like very temperamental. Like if anybody touches a window or if the wind blows too hard, it like the sensor thinks somebody's breaking in.
Okay.
So.
As long as you're safe.
I'm good.
All right, Sheila,
you.
do you want to share your unpopular opinion?
I can. So I keep going back and forth with a couple things, but I came back to kind of what my big heart in teaching is, and that is enjoy. And I feel like an unpopular opinion is that joy it's not a nice have. It's nice to have joy in the classroom, whether it's from the student's aspect or a teacher's aspect. That my opinion is that joy is a necessity. And it's not and I kind of, this is where I was going with when we were talking about the time, the longer day or shorter day is, it's not something, well, if we have time, we can do this because it brings me joy, or it's something that's a fun activity. That fun and joy kind of always get lumped together as the extra instead of the core piece of the learning, which goes back to the conversation about absence in the classroom, because when we show up full of joy, when we have coming from a place of feeling good, the learning multiplies, it compounds. Because, and if anyone here, and I believe every single one of you have, or if you're just a participant in professional development, we usually start off with some type of, connector for the audience, and it's often connecting to something that's personal to them or share out something, It's that connection piece. Well, why do we want to connect? It primes our brain for learning. I know in one trainings that I have done, it's always, I go to take out your phone, find something that brings you joy because of the work I do with joy spotting every day. It's to prime the brain for learning. Why do classrooms start with morning meetings often? It's because we want to connect and feel a sense of security and come from a place of something that's feeling good, or checking in with our emotions. Joy is what is going to make the learning happen in the classroom, not something that happens at the end. And with the research that joy brings and opens us up to not just a sense of feeling good, but more opportunity for creativity, more options for being more open-minded and open to others' opinions and thoughts that may be different than ours, thinking outside the box. And too often that joy piece, the fun piece, is taken away, not just from the students because there's no time for it, but also from the teachers who are given scripts that this is what you teach and you can't go off and do what you have enjoyed teaching or what your experience has been beneficial to the students. It's follow this script because we have data to collect and we all need to be on the same page at the same time and date. And you're stripping the teacher from showing up and sharing their passions and their love from what brings them joy because we want to all conform to this specific piece of information. And so I'm getting a little passionate here. So I'm going to stop and have someone jump in here.
I think that I think that we all agree with you on this call for sure. But I think that joy can seem fluffy because people feel overloaded with how much they have going on. And it's been a hot minute since I've been a classroom teacher, since I was a school-based coach. And even then, I felt a tremendous pressure to do all these things. So sometimes it feels like I don't have room for anything extra. But I think what's so important about the work that you do that other people may not know is talking about the psychology behind joy. And that when you really get into like the science behind it, then even people who feel like it's fluffy understand like deeply why it's so important. And I feel like that is something that is missing. Like Kathleen Beachboard does work in the science of hope. And so maybe what we need more of in schools is like less saying learning should be like this, you should do this, and getting into like the science behind it, the science behind the joy and hope and kindness. And that shapes why things are happening the way that they are.
Yeah, thank you so much for adding into that, Naomi. And I agree with you. I think when, from an academic standpoint, the understanding behind the psychology and the science, and I think more of, I thought we were going more in that direction when there was the big talk of growth mindset, because there was a lot more talk about the brain science and the neuroplasticity of the brain and how our brains function and grow. I thought we were going in that direction. And then it seemed like, that like so much in education, it was popular and then got pushed aside and on to the next thing. But definitely when the science is understood, then it becomes, and I feel like, excuse me, same with a lot of social emotional learning. Krista, I know you can attest to this, that it's not the fluff when we understand why. It's just part of what you do each and every day and everything that you do, and not something extra that gets plopped on top or set aside for a half hour once a week for a little mini lesson. That's when it is experienced and understood, but it's getting that initial into the classroom, that initial piece of experiencing it. And once you experience it, you can understand, oh, it did make a difference when we took 2 minutes to understand the science behind it and applied it. And Naomi, when you said, when I bring in the psychology, that is the work that I do, is that applied positive psychology. It's not just teaching, here's the science, it's here's the science, but let's actually experience it and apply it to everything that we're doing in all of our days.
I'd like to add in, as I'm thinking too, that I'd love SEL integration. And I also have a huge passion for curriculum design and development. And I think we have to be careful as educators, and I'll speak from a secondary perspective, that as long as we understand that it's not our joy all of the time, that it's what the students enjoy. Because I've worked with teachers on curriculum development, the written curriculum, and they're like, oh, I just love this topic so much. But it's for the students. Or I love this project, but do the students? And is it tied into the learning that they need, and that you've all agreed that as a group, a cohesive curriculum group or PLC, that is non-negotiable for students? So instead of going rogue and being like, this is fun, this is joyful, like, let's talk to the students, and are they really enjoying this too? And how is it connecting? Just a quick, I was working with some ELA teachers at a high school, and they have a program that is pretty strict. And so the teacher took out the hero's journey this year to sit with that. And he realized, looking back, he's like, that was fun for the students. They loved connecting their own hero's journey and the steps to what they were reading. He said, I need to bring that back next year, no matter what. It has to be a non-negotiable, because the students enjoyed it. It was part of their, and it made them learn that particular piece of ELA content at a deeper level, like you've said. And so just from a secondary point of view, is it joy? And I know you're talking a lot about joy and connecting with each other, but then also thinking about, is this a fun project that you as a teacher really like? Or is this something that is really adding for the students?
Just because you were talking there about the secondary kids, this school year I've gone back down to the early years for the first time in a while, and my goodness, the joy is just present in the little people all the time. And my first thought with that is, where does that go? Where do we lose that joy that they just come bumbling in with every morning? They just have it already ready to go. But the second part is, it's made it clear to me how contagious that joy is. Like, I feel so much more joy when I see them come running over with their little picture that they've drawn, or a story to tell me. So it is contagious, and we need more of that in the building, I think.
Sorry, I'm trying to click my unmute. I'm using my iPad instead of the computer. I was like, it's not working as easily. I love what you said there, both Krista and Christine. And I think, just to add to that, the joy isn't, I loved how you brought up, Krista, like, just because you love doing something, it shouldn't necessarily be in the classroom part of the project. But I also wanted to specify too, that when I'm talking about joy, in addition to those areas, it's also simply showing up with, and we kind of commented it before we started the podcast, in your environment. Like, I know Naomi and I are huge pink lovers. So just in your space, what are you doing to bring in joy into your day? So whether it's how you decorate or don't decorate your classroom, what do you have, again, going back to that intentionality of what's hanging up on the walls in your classroom? What's the purpose behind it? But your desk, what colors are you putting on your desk? Because just that little primer of the day of, like, I see behind me, my Statue of Liberty, but that represents so many different things for me that brings me joy. One, because yes, I love New York City and it's my happy place. But it's also a reminder of my son, who loves, as a child, building Legos. And so it's made out of Legos. And so it's a reminder of him as well. That little piece primes me for whenever I come to sit down at my desk and do work. It's just that little piece of joy of, like, makes me feel good. So that when I show up to do the work, I'm primed for it with a elevated positive emotion. What are we doing for our students? Do we have to be specific of, everybody has a red folder because it's red for English? Or is it letting them have that? And I understand, because I was a color coding fiend in my classroom, everything had colors. But is there an opportunity to at least to have one folder where it's bring whatever kind of folder you want from home, or decorate it with your favorite things on it, so that when they pull out the folder and they may dread, and I'm just going to go to Naomi because she's our math girl. Math sometimes is like that dreaded subject for so many. But if you could pull out your math folder and have some things on there that bring you joy, little stickers or decorations or things on there, it would then prime them a little bit of a feel good for a subject that they're not looking forward to because it might be difficult or not their favorite. So in addition to the curriculum piece of it and the activity part of it, what are we doing for both our teachers and our students to allow them to have a piece of themselves in their work environment to bring them joy? And then that can go into a whole nother subject of the culture of a school, and what are we doing to create, the culture of, being friendly and saying hello and hi and greeting people in the hallways, to just give that ounce of joy as well. Or when opportunities do we have to share celebrations with each other of what's going well in our lives, and spreading that piece that is so contagious, which leads to gratitude. The more we share what brings us joy, we find out there are all the things that we can be grateful for. So just wanted to add that piece of the environment as well.
There's so many
I for
things.
sure feel a little bit attacked about the color coding, because as a first grade teacher, that was 100% me. Reading was always red, the notebook and the folder, and math should always be blue. And I will fight you on that. Math is supposed to be blue, but I love this idea of like stickers and things that make you happy on it, because I don't know that I could like let them pick whatever folder. Like that might be a little too far. Like maybe that's an unpopular opinion.
Yeah, totally. Totally. And I was not only color coded, but I had labels that went in a certain spot on the folder. Totally agree with you on that. Totally.
Yeah. Same. My reading was always red. Math was always blue. It just made sense to me.
Was science or social studies green?
No, science is green. Nature.
Okay. That's how it was for me. I was curious if you had green there.
Yeah. Social studies was green for me, and science was purple.
Oh.
Okay. I
think it's because science was usually last, and I really needed the folders in rainbow order. Like I think that's it.
This is a whole other podcast episode, ladies, about like the color coding and the meanings behind it.
Yeah, and I'm just watching our time here too. So, Naomi, since you were talking a little bit about math, did you want to share yours?
Oh, sure. My unpopular opinion is that math intervention should only be delivered by a certified teacher. And when I do math intervention and MTSS professional learning sessions and webinars, I make no friends when I say this. Like everybody has but what about? No, like full stop. Math intervention should only be delivered by a certified teacher. That means not a computer program. I put the kid on this program. That's not an intervention. That's great extra support. I'm so glad you did it. That's not an intervention. The paraprofessional does it. I'm sure that's great extra practice. And if they're well trained, it can be highly beneficial. That's not an intervention. And like a parent volunteer, a peer buddy, that's not an intervention. And really, like two reasons. Number one is that students who are in intervention are struggling the most, and therefore should be served by the most qualified people. That it shouldn't be that this is the stuff nobody wants to deal with and it's an afterthought. It's they deserve to be served by the most highly qualified people because they have the most intensive needs. Also, I do have a background in special education. And if a student with an IEP was serviced by a paraprofessional or a computer program, the parents could absolutely file a due process lawsuit and win. and the school or district would be on the hook for providing compensatory services. And I understand that that's a high bar for special education, but why wouldn't we want that to also be the standard for serving students? A lot of times, our students in RTI who are getting tier 2 and 3 services may eventually end up in special education. And so we should just be giving them the most intensive support from the beginning, like the most highly qualified personnel support, and not just, but I put him on a computer or sent him to the corner to work with this other person.
I agree with
I
you on that. And that's something that I've always been very vocal about because, I've worked in various schools and, oh, this kid, we're going to give them this many minutes a week for their, to meet their IEP goals. And I'm like, if this parent knew what their rights were for their kid, this would not fly. Like, this does not go well. Like, we really need to make sure that those are met properly. Side note. But then I think at first when you were talking, Naomi, I was like, yeah, interesting. Okay. But then when you said like these students with the most needs should be taught by the most qualified, I'm like, yes, that right there, just like that sentence alone makes perfect sense. And everything else, you're right, is great, is extra practice, is extra support, but the actual intervention should be delivered by the most qualified person. So, yeah, I don't know if that's an unpopular opinion. I guess maybe in the sense that like it's more work for the teacher themselves, I guess, but I like it. It's a good
yeah.
one.
And I think too that it's a lot of people not knowing or understanding that, and also not having the resources, right? Like the kids with disabilities who have specific needs, there are specific people to work with them, but whether they get those people in the spots to help them is another thing, right? Like it always comes down to budget or like who's available. Like I work in this area that has limited resources, but they have so many kids who have specific needs. It's really hard to get the right qualified people in there. And so when I was coaching a teacher who had a student with very extreme behaviors. And so I was like, okay, this is beyond what I can support her with. I have to reach out to our behavior specialist or interventionist so that she can work with the teacher, because I'm like, this is beyond what we can kind of do at the classroom level. It's got to be escalated to that. And but they have such limited resources at their district specifically that they're like scrambling because they don't have enough people to support the kids with the high needs. And so a lot of times they just get people like just people, more TAs, which is like better than no extra bodies. They're not necessarily doing the intensive supports, but it's someone to be there. And it's sad because there isn't enough trained people, that they just have to kind of hire people to be there. So, it's always comes down to money, unfortunately, and resource.
But I feel like I would prefer to, if you're talking about paraprofessionals, I would prefer to give them like the bulk of the class. They're very competent people, and then use the teacher with the little group off to the side. Like 100% agree. Not just with math, Naomi. I know math is your realm, but reading, any of those interventions, it's, yeah, absolutely. It's got to be that specialized knowledge for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely unpopular among like school administrators for sure, right? They're like, how am I supposed to make that happen? But the bottom line is that I've never worked with a school that was like, we have enough. We have everything we need. We have enough money. We have enough people. Everybody is trying to serve students in a deficit. Everybody is trying to do the best that they can with limited resources. And so, with that in mind, then it's all about how you prioritize and use the resources that, like, our budget doesn't allow for that. I like that may be the unpopular part is like that's not an excuse. What Christine said, maybe it's flipping the script so that it's the paraprofessional leading that tier one instruction to allow 15 minutes for the teacher to pull a group and do that. Right. And that is thinking outside of the box. It's changing the way that you use the resources, but it may better help all of the kids.
Such a good point. Nicole or Krista, does your unpopular opinion follow that, or is it separate? Because one of you can share yours next.
Mine, I don't know. Mine, I kind of thought about mine like when Sheila was talking about joy. I don't know. I'll just share mine because I feel like it kind of ties to everybody's in a sense. So mine is about pacing guides. And I will probably also get really passionate about this, Sheila. So I'm going to just really just state like the facts here, okay? Because I guess there's no facts, that's my opinion. But that when we have teachers, these district mandated curriculums, which is okay as a resource, in my opinion. But when these pacing guides are inflexible, they essentially distance teachers from responsive, student-centered instruction. So thinking about the time thing, you're going down to 4 days maybe, or you have longer days. You're still following these pacing guides. And it's like you have to do this on this day at this time in this way. There's no joy for anyone there. There's no joy for the teacher because they're literally just delivering content. There's no joy for the students because it's the exact same thing every day, the exact same way. And you're not able to like meet the needs of your actual kids because you don't get to know them as a learner. You're just saying, this is what you need to know. Now do this in response. And I just think about like what you were saying, Sheila, about joy and that priming aspect of it. Like there's no priming involved in this, right? And I've always had parents ask so many times because I always taught little kids like, well, they're not reading yet, or when, and I'm like, we have to like learn to enjoy to read first. We want to enjoy the act of reading and what reading is in books, and then the learning just happens because we're open to it, we're excited about it, we're interested in it. So I'm gonna stop there, and you guys can share if you want.
So many things to say about that. I related and unrelated slightly, but I work with many teachers who are just following their pacing guides and have zero joy in their lives as teachers. And well, I mean, I should say not say zero, let's say minimal joy when they're actually teaching. They love their kids, which is great. But I was working with one teacher last year who I still work with this year, and she was very, she was trying to really stick to things. And so often then she would just kind of teach the lesson from the book and kind of take herself out of the lesson. So she was just following the guide, right? Like just doing what it said. And so I was talking to her about like, use your guide as just that. It's a guide, right? So read it, summarize it, think about what do you actually need to teach, and then just teach it. Like just be yourself, be natural. The kids love you. They'll probably respond better to what you're trying to do. And she brought it up the other day when we met, and she's like, I've been doing that more, and it just feels so much better. I feel like more relaxed and more confident in my teaching because I'm not relying specifically, and like I said, it's unrelated to the pacing guide, but just guides in general. And she's like, and the kids could she's like, I feel like I can connect to the kids better because I don't have this kind of barrier in front of me. And I think sometimes the pacing guides and the teacher guides, it's great for the resource, but it's also such a barrier to the flexibility that you need as a teacher to respond to the needs of your kids. Like, again, the key word is guide. It's not the thing that it's not written in stone. We use it to help us move along, but we have to be responsive. Otherwise, like we're teaching a guide, we're not teaching kids.
But I think that's the issue that I'm seeing, and I'm sure you're seeing too, Tammy, is like that's what they're doing. And their responsive piece, it makes me think of you, Krista, and like I've asked a few teachers, like, okay, so what are you doing? Like, how are you, do the kids have any say in this? Or are you getting their opinions? Like, how are they feeling about it? And one teacher shared recently was just like, she's like, they hate it. They're bored with it. They can just like tell, like, they know what to do at this, during this time, but like they're bored because it's the exact same thing, the exact same way every single day. And so there's also no time for that like social emotional learning either, because it's like, well, I have to do this. We don't have time for that. That's not, valuable or important because this has to be completed.
I've worked again. I want to go back to those ELA teachers I'm working with. There actually is one, not actually, there is one who has done a fantastic job on integrating SEL while she's using this new program. And we just recorded a podcast that's coming out in a couple of weeks. But I think one of the other things to really bring up around that is that what they think works in theory does not always work in practice. So the teachers are like, we don't have any autonomy. We're not actually getting to what the students enjoy. They're giving us snippets of what we have to get through. And then the admin talk to the company, and the company's like, oh, well, they can add in 2 of their own texts a year. But the caveat is they can only do that if they get through what is the non-negotiable part. And another interesting piece of that then is that kids are only reading parts and snippets of excerpts, not an entire book. And so you're not taking them on that journey, like you mentioned, Nicole, about having that love of learning, because they're only getting little pieces here and there of different works and not an entire story that they can follow the arc for.
I do want to kind of present the other side of that too. I think that pacing guides are a very important tool to have, and the issues come in how they're implemented. But I think that they're an essential tool because I have absolutely worked with schools where I went in December and they're still on chapter 2 in math because my kids aren't ready for what's next. This is all they can handle. And so like we've changed the expectations completely. We're holding these kids to a lower standard and not even trying to teach like an appropriate amount of grade level curriculum. So I think there can be like too much autonomy. There needs to be like a careful balance of you don't have to teach exactly this page on exactly this day, but like it's plus or minus 2 weeks within this. Like you don't just get to stick on one chapter for 2 months because you feel like not everybody gets it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. They're great resources, absolutely. And like I have done curriculum development and design for schools, and I think it's important to have, you know, a plan, a guide for your school year for sure. But it's that the like rigidity of it and not being able to use it as a tool and having to just use it with fidelity rather than, like Tammy was saying, take it, digest it, try to understand it, and then teach it rather than just do this on this day kind of idea.
For sure. We are running short on time. So let's get to Krista's unpopular opinion.
Sure. I changed mine from what I had emailed earlier because of a situation that happened. But if you're following my newsletter and my blogs, you've seen this come up. And so, Nicole, you sort of set the foundation earlier when you talked about your early teacher self. And my early teacher self would have totally pushed back on what I'm about to say. And I'll tell you why in a minute. But my unpopular opinion is that if for any reason a student is removed from your classroom, the teacher has to sit down with the student and have a repair. They can't kick a student out and then not deal with it, because otherwise, when we're looking at separation without repair, we're not having complete learning. The child is learning that I'm a problem, and the culture is that we just discard things when it gets hard. The adult learns that distance over time can make a resolution, and the adults, and this is where I would have pushed back, because I felt very conflict averse when I was younger. And so I would have thought it was a conflict and a bad thing. But I think that if we're talking about integrating social emotional learning and we want students to model that, we as educators have to be willing to model that as well. And I think about my 21-year-old self teaching juniors in high school. I did not kick kids out of class, one, because they went to a 30-minute detention after school that they could give two hoots about. So it didn't change. It doesn't change their behaviors. And oftentimes what I saw from teachers who did that is it caused a disconnection between the teachers and the students. The students felt unwanted. It was never rectified. And it creates a system that I think reinforces control and compliance over connection and taking accountability, and showing how conflict is not a bad thing. It can help us grow and come together. So now I'm all behind it, but telling my earlier self that I would have had to have those hard conversations would have sent me into a tizzy, even though I would have known it's important. So when a student's removed from class, a teacher should be required to sit down, and even if they need a mediator, to repair so the student feels welcomed.
I like that, and that also applies to my toddler currently. When I can't keep my cool, when I can't regulate my own emotions, we have to come together and have a little repair, which is modeling her that this is how you regulate, right? But also, to your point, Krista, like the repair, but also saying, not saying like, well, when you did this, that's why this happened, right? It's, this is how I felt. These were the actions I took. I'm sorry. I would love to, move forward differently. So it's not like, I'm sorry, but you did this. Like, it's that the repair is so important for kids, because like you're saying, like it creates that like disconnect instead. And then they don't feel safe in a space that they have to spend all their days and all their time, which is where they should feel safe.
I've seen the disconnect happen, right? Where I've been in classrooms, and even as a teacher too, where I didn't realize the importance of that repair piece. And sometimes it happened, sometimes it didn't. But I see that now in classrooms, and I'm like, oh man, especially with little kids when they just can't regulate themselves yet. And the teacher doesn't get that opportunity right away to meet with them to talk about it, because there's just so many other things that they're trying to address, right, when the student comes back. So it's really like kind of back to that intentionality, like really thinking about, okay, this is when the student left. I have to take note that I have to remember to talk to them when they come back, even if that means like the kids are doing something independently or something when they come back. If I'm doing whole group, like it has to be an immediate thing. Otherwise, time goes on and it gets let go of, and you don't, it's then the connection with your student is just, it fizzles. It's so much harder to repair.
Honestly, I think if that was the rule, I'd have thought twice about asking for external help for a student, because I too am non-confrontational. And to avoid having that conversation later, I would just handle the less difficult thing right now.
Absolutely. Okay, Sheila?
Oh, I was just going to chime in with when Krista was saying, like, having to follow up to say, yes, 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 because as a former first grade classroom teacher, my experiences with children who were sent out of the room was not in my room, but sadly it was when they went to the, the special classes, the extra classes that were looked at as more of a reward than actually a necessity for every single child in my room, not just the ones that conform to the rules of that classroom, that I would go often to those more difficult children when I would go to pick them up from those art or music classes, and they're sitting out in the hallway in first grade, out in the hallway because that teacher kicked them out of the room. And when I would go to the door to pick up my full class, the teacher would say, yeah, they can't be in here because I can't teach my class with them in here. You need to take them. And one piece of me was always, well, when they're in my room, I have to teach them whether I like the way they're behaving or not. They are part of my responsibility in that room, and I need to work with them. And to go back to what you said, Chris, I have to connect and find out what's going on so that we can both come up with a solution on how to handle it, not just for them to fix themselves, but also how can I adjust myself to better accommodate and meet this child where they are and what needs they may have. And yet I thought, but these other teachers are just kicking these children out of the room without ever getting to know, oh, if you knew the story behind why they're coming in and acting out the way they're acting out, you may have a little more compassion for them and understanding of why. Because it's not that they're just wanting to be a problem child, but they don't know how to handle the life circumstances that they're in. And so had they had to have that follow-up piece, it could have been so substantial, not just from the educator standpoint of understanding that child, but also for that child to understand that they matter. Like that piece of mattering for that child is, no, you matter just as much in that classroom as everyone else in there. And that I see you and I want to know you. And a flip on the educator side as the whatever class they're teaching, that what you're teaching is important and matters to every individual, not just the ones that are sitting as robots and conforming to whatever it is that they have to do, but like your subject matters to all of them. So I wish that was the case, Krista.
Sorry, I'm sorry. I don't want to cut off our conversation, but we are at a point where we have to end it. I think we need another hour or two to discuss many of these things that have come up. But we have someone else waiting for us to record. So we'll pause our episode there. Normally we would get pair down pointers from everyone, but today's episode, there was so much in there that I think our listeners can just pick out their nuggets themselves, and we'll definitely have some more. I think we need some more unpopular opinion episodes for sure. Thank you so much for being with us today, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you.